This video is brought to you by the good folks at KEH. Not only is KEH the oldest and biggest at what they do, buying and selling exclusively used camera gear of all sorts since 1979, but they do it well, with integrity and both a 180-day warranty and 21-day return policy, free shipping on orders of $75 or more. Which is why, because they make it as futz-free a process as possible, they are our go-to whenever we are looking to fund new purchases by selling our own gear or buying that special used piece of kit properly graded and checked when we want to go quirky or old school. Check them out using the special links and 5% discount in the video description below. Thank you, KEH. Your ship has finally come in. Fujifilm's X100VI, hold that thought, is what you thought it would be. An X100V with what are essentially the guts of an X-T5. Same 5th generation 40 megapixel X-Trans sensor and X processor, a newer 6-stop spec 5.5 if you're using the OVF only, IBIS system, small enough to fit inside the camera without materially changing the dimensions or weight from that of the X100V, even as the rear screen tilt has been improved by 50%, that is, an additional 15-degree downward tilt. The X-T5's guts also means up to 6.2K 30p, 4K 60p, 1080 240p, 10-bit 422, F-Log and F-Log 2, with the usual provisos about crops and limited recording time. Though none of this video stuff matters to me at all. Hold that thought. The bottom line? This is going to be a massive success. But is it enough? Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for 3 Blind Men and an Elephant and Right. Today I want to talk about Fujifilm's just announced $1,600 X100VI. But before I do, this. We're out here along the East River in New York, scouting locations for our next Streets of New York photography workshop coming up this May 3rd through 6th. It's a wonderful combination of classroom instruction, peer review in a very supportive environment, wonderful people, and getting you out on the streets of the greatest city in the world for the genre. Space is limited. There is an early bird discount up until March 1st. So if you're interested, please hop over to www.3bmep.com/streets24. In the meantime, Claudia and I have some more location scouting to do. On to the X100VI. First, some of the best images I've ever taken on the streets of New York were done with the X100V. In fact, the cover of our Streets of New York, the book, was shot with an X100V. Straight up. The V was an exceptional piece of kit. The X100VI is essentially the same camera, only better, per the differences I just mentioned, although I forgot to mention they now have another simulation, Reala Ace, and those differences are quite significant in the real world. I got an unusually high number of first pass keepers that just pop. Like this. To my way of thinking, the 6 is absolutely worth the modest $200 premium over the V, but the good news is, for the budget conscious among us, that suddenly, finally, used X100Vs are available now. And perhaps as soon as today, the prices of those used X100Vs will drop. I'd say a used V remains an excellent alternative for the more budget-conscious among us, the X100F as well. And the X100F prices will probably go down too. The X100V was, in my estimation, an unbeatable tool for street photography at anywhere near the price, superior to both the less expensive Ricoh GR series on the one hand, the far more expensive original Leica Q on the other. Yes, I just said that out loud. There were reasons for this. While the original Q was introduced in 2015, the original X100 had been introduced 4 years earlier in 2011. And the fourth generation X100V was introduced 5 years after the Q in 2020, 1 year after Leica introduced the Q2. The X100V's improvements over the previous X100 were sufficient to make it the only X100 for me, and with its improved integrated 23mm f2 lens, along with improved hybrid phase detection autofocus, marginally higher megapixel count courtesy of a fourth generation X-Trans sensor and X-Pro processor, and better weather resistance when used with an OEM filter, it was, one could argue, and I would agree, functionally superior to the no EVF, integrated flash removed, focal plane shutter equipped Ricoh GR3, image stabilization on the GR3 notwithstanding. One might also argue, and I might also agree, that it was functionally superior as a camera, if not nearly as satisfying nor capable, all else being equal, of final image quality, due to the differences in lens and sensor image quality, as the contrast detection only autofocus, non-articulating screen equipped, non-integrated flash equipped, not as well sealed full frame Leica Q, and, one might argue, functionally superior to the Q2. Now, I would take exception to this latter assertion, but there really can be no argument that in either instance, the X100V was a far superior value to both generations of Q. Still, the X100V was, in the end, not persuasive enough for me to purchase. The fiddly secondary controls, the lack of any kind of image stabilization, the fundamentally compromised EVF. I know, blasphemy to some of us, but come on, we're all adults here and reasonable people can disagree. Even the X100V's price advantage, not sufficient to offset the superior build quality, ergonomics, menu system, color science, sensor and overall performance, dynamic range, high ISO noise, lens image quality, and lens-based image stabilization, EVF, weather sealing, and joy in hand of the, yes, far more expensive Leica Q2. Which, by the way, I didn't buy either. Not only because of the other cameras I already owned at the time, but because I could imagine, not that far off into the future, a next generation Q3 which would have hybrid phase detection autofocus, would have an articulating rear screen, would have an even better EVF, even higher resolution sensor, wider dynamic range, and better low light performance. And I might have saved up enough money by then, if those improvements really did come to pass, to buy one, which they did. And so we did. Yet this X100VI, the X100S, T, and F nomenclature reflecting the second, third, and fourth generations of the camera, the Roman numeral V representing the fifth generation, duh, because Fujifilm felt it couldn't use the F again, although why they just wouldn't call it the 5, I don't know. Sorry, got lost. Anyway, the 6 now has IBIS sensor resolution quite close to the Q2, not so far off from the Q3, and is less than 1/3 the price of a Q3. One can now argue, perhaps vociferously, that the 100VI is absolutely functionally superior to the Q2. Yeah. It just might be. I have to admit that for many of us, most of us, who already love the X100 series for what it is rather than what it is not, the response will be unequivocal. They will agree, especially at the price. And that is because beyond the hardware, beyond how much less expensive the X100 VI is than a Q3, the 6 now closes in on half the price of a used Q2, while offering, yes, absolutely, the superior autofocus and an articulating screen that have only just come to the Q3, while also having the integrated TTL-capable flash with the same kind of leaf shutter of the Q series, whereas there is simply no particularly satisfying flash solution on offer from Leica directly, and our ProPhoto A2 simply inconsistent with a tiny, unobtrusive, and futz-free shooting experience. Functionally superior to the Q3, as others will argue too? It's getting very, very close, even for me. So that should be it, right? Everything that we love about the X100V plus the two biggest things many of us wanted, image stabilization and sensor resolution, all in a package smaller and significantly lighter than any Q, with an integrated flash that no Q carries, at a fantastically lower price. And I will tell you that this increase in resolution especially does make a difference, a significant difference. It makes the integrated XF23F2, which was already really, really good, look even better, which is to say it now looks great, and it allows you to crop the crap out of an image if that is what the image needs. Especially when, you guessed it, you flip into the Acros film simulation. Although, fair enough, if you do not make large prints or do not crop the crap out of an image, the resolution won't matter to you. Even if Fujifilm respectfully disagrees, made manifest in the default setting for the control ring around the lens, which allows one to punch into what are marked as full frame equivalents of 50 and 75 millimeter fields of view. I am far less certain about the IBIS, however, because while I have reasonably steady hands, I could not get below 1/15 of a second exposures without noticeable blur inside Trinity Church at the top of Wall Street. This is nowhere near the quoted 5.5 or 6 stop advantage over what I assume is the reciprocal rule, that is, 6 stops slower than the 1/125th of a second based on an ISO of 125, a half-second exposure. Still, even 3 stops makes a material difference. But here's the rub, although it may well just be me. I am used to being a statistical outlier. I'm not sure why Fujifilm didn't take this opportunity to do more. First, the secondary controls remain as fiddly as ever, with the lightest gloves I've been able to find. For example, pressing the playback button in the field to make sure I'd gotten what I wanted while I was there was almost enough to make me put a fork in my eye. I mean, this camera is just not designed for gloves, period, and it's not just that button. The pancake dimensions of the lens are wonderful for true pocket carry, but they make using the assignable control ring another exercise in frustration. Some of the default settings out of the box, including autofocus, make no sense to me either. Although this is hardly a problem unique to Fujifilm. Second, the EVF remains tiny and compromised. Third, it still has a single USB-C port, which allows for charging, or using a mic, or using a headphone, but only one at a time. The last two via the small USB-C to 3.5 millimeter adapter cable that is always the first thing I lose whenever I pull an X camera out of the box. My bad. But I can't be the only one, right? Fourth, this is not the first time I'm saying this, and this is not a problem unique to Fujifilm either. I believe that Fujifilm's menu system has become so complex and convoluted that it is likely to disincline an unnecessarily large portion of the smartphone generation from leaping the chasm to dedicated cameras. I will actually quote myself here from yesterday's video when I had these same lamentations about Sony cameras. Compared to a smartphone's user interface and user experience, the menu system and the physical controls continue on pretty much as Rube Goldberg-esque as one could imagine, as much as they have ever been, taken together reminding me of nothing, actually, so much as a stalagmite, an accretion of drippings built atop software going back to a prehistoric time in camera years anyway, before there were digital cameras, going all the way back to Casio calculators in the 1970s, and then moving forward drip upon ugly drip with Nintendo Game Boys in the 1980s, Sony PlayStations in the early 1990s, Microsoft Xbox consoles in the early 2000s, rather than any kind of thoughtful, clean sheet approach to this complexity. I'm talking about something as simple as turning on the TTL flash, for example, which, in spite of being a central feature of the camera and a strong selling point, I'd assume, for smartphone users, is buried either in an already too complicated quick menu, or even further down Dante's Inferno to here, at which point anyone weaned on smartphones, not already intimately familiar with Fujifilm's menu system and physical control, or not delighted by the thought of and committed to first reading the entire unholy manual, will feel like an absolute idiot. I know. It's simple enough. Anyone familiar with the camera will tell you to assign the flash mode to, say, the front fascia center button like this, which I did. But why Fujifilm didn't think it useful or necessary to have a dedicated on-off mode flash physical secondary control, something you could find just by looking at the rear panel of a circa 2009 Canon S90, is simply beyond me. Nor would it have been beyond Fujifilm to add, for example, even 32 gigabytes of internal storage. Again, something that would make a great deal of sense, I think, in a camera targeting a younger generation. Or do the work to increase battery capacity, either by better living through chemistry or by slightly enlarging the grip. Then again, all of this highlights one difference among many between a YouTuber like me with a few weeks' time horizon and product managers, engineers, and finance guys who have to do the actual work of making something so complicated real, navigating the complexities of things like stewardship and margins, risk and ambition, made in Japan or made in China now over the course of years. I am not unmindful of that, and I mean no disrespect to anyone at the company, truly. But I am just saying. Anyway, I'll wrap it up this way for now. Irrespective of what some will probably call whining, the X100VI is, as I said at the outset, going to be a massive hit. That the company has managed to incorporate the X-T5's guts into a package this small, weight and dimensions essentially unchanged from the X100V, and only 200 more than the V, practically guarantee it. Never mind all the video stuff I also said at the outset I don't care about, because in fact there are far better day-in, day-out video-centric hybrids that make more sense for what we do in our YouTube work. But with the newest generation of photographers weaned on smartphones, and Fujifilm's decision to defer significant changes to the ergonomics and user interface of it, to make the leap from phone to dedicated camera an easy experience instead of a frustrating one, especially as companies like Apple continue to ride Moore's Law, grow ever more expert at multi-shot computational imaging and AI especially, I suspect the X100VI will also be the last generation of the X100 series that gets off so easily. But What do you think? A big shout out to KEH for sponsoring this video, a great resource for finding just this kind of gear. Check them out using the special links and 5% discount in the video description below. Thank you, KEH. If you like what you've seen here today, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. That's a big one and an easy one because it's free and more than 2/3 of you don't. And or join the conversation in the comments section below because this is an exceptionally knowledgeable and generous audience. If you want to learn more about our street photography workshops, streets of New York, streets of Paris, Berlin, or Tokyo, custom private photo walks in New York City only, or want to explore private Zoom sessions for portfolio reviews, gear selection, and the like, no travel required, hop over to www.3bmep.com. Finally, please consider supporting our work by joining us here on YouTube, purchasing official Three Blind Men and an Elephant swag, dropping us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially by becoming a patron over on Patreon, all links down below. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.